Well, good morning and welcome to this month, in fact, this first of 2021 Free Friday webinar. We are delighted to have a guest speaker, and I'm going to tell you about her in just a moment. My name is Michelle Mott, and I'm the founder of Inspiring Solutions. For the past 30 years, we have been inspiring people with practical solutions for positive change. And we have recently aligned with JER HR Group. And Sandie is the Director of Learning and Development. And today she is going to inspire you by starting off 2021 using a STOP process. We've been doing the webinars for the past 8 years as a way of providing monthly motivation and exposing you to one of our programs or products. This month, we want to have a number of resources in your hands as she's talking through them, one of which is the STOP checklist and worksheet. We also are going to talk about our upcoming webinar schedule and a strategic planning program description. Afterwards, by participating today, you'll be sent the white paper that she wrote that will give you more about what learning and development professionals should be preparing for. After the webinar, you'll be asked to complete a short evaluation to offer your comments and more specifically suggestions for future topics, because we want to hear what are some of your challenges so we can address them. As I mentioned, we now have aligned ourselves with an organization out of New York and North Carolina, JER HR Group, that has over 40 experienced senior consultants. And together, we now represent a very comprehensive model to help businesses with talent development, strategic planning, assessments, compensation consultation, performance management, workplace engagement, HR services support, and compliance. And I know many of you are joining us today because you've had the privilege of working with JER HR Group, and some of you are joining us because you've been our client. Today, first question you're going to be asked is to identify what keeps you up at night. Then she's going to help you get unstuck to go by using Just Stop. And then leaving you with the challenge of taking some baby steps. And we're going to give you a very special offer to guide you through those first steps. So allow me to introduce to you Sandie Bateman, who's not only an MBA, but she is a certified professional in talent development. She's been the Director of Leadership and Development for JER HR Group. And recently, or actually for the past 14 years, has designed and implemented both public and client courses. She's the author of the ebook that you're going to be given after the webinar, and she's certified in Wiley's Everything Disc, PXT assessments, Profiles Checkpoint 360, Profiles Sales Assessment, and Profiles Managerial Fit. We have, just in our last couple months of getting to know each other, learned so much from her knowledge. And now, not only do we admire her as a professional, we are pleased to call her a friend. So Sandie, let me give you controls and ask the first question.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that. As you were talking about our partnering together, I think about an analogy that we use when we talk about diversity within many of our clients. And rather than thinking of us as a new soup, we think of us as now a new stew. And the difference is, in a soup, everything's blended together and you never see the pieces from the individual components. But in our stew, we're using all the pieces. You can still see what they offer, and together it makes a very tasty treat. So I think of that when I think of our new organization, incorporating inspiring solutions with JER HR Group. So, yeah, Mulligan stew. There you go, Dana. So my question is, what keeps you up at night? Last month, Michelle talked about weathering this crazy storm of 2020, coming out of the COVID situation. the economy, the change in our jobs, the political scene. So now we go into 2021. What still keeps you up at night? So if you would just put one word into the chat box, and so that would be helpful. I will tell you, I'm going to put, this doesn't keep me up at night, but this is my word for the year. Michelle challenged us last month to come up with a word, and mine's renew, because I wanted to take the high road and look at 2021 as an opportunity to renew. But there are certainly things that keep me up at night. To-do list, I see someone's, and I do. I find myself sometimes waking up in the middle of the night, making a list in my mind, and it's like, oh, just get up and do it. So engagement, that's good. Lindsay says her word is refocus. I like that. That's kind of on the same train of thought as the renew. Moving the organization to the national stage. Whew, that is a big one. And funding. So these are, what's interesting is we see a combination of organizational issues that are perhaps keeping you up at night, but also personal issues that are keeping you up at night. And so we cannot ignore the fact that we're certainly impacted by both. Dana sees exciting changes, and she's part of our new Mulligan stew. So let's move on. Again, last month, we talked about that we were all in this crazy, crazy storm. And so the attempt last month was to get us all in the same boat. So we're sort of all aware of where we're headed. This month, we want to get that boat steered in the direction that's best for us. And it may be a boat, or in the case of when we talk about S.T.O.P, we may be thinking about the automobiles that we drive. So when I think about the S.T.O.P, I really, this came about as I was asked to pull this ebook together for what do we see for learning and development professionals for 2021? And I kept myself up at night, many, many nights, thinking, what in the world am I going to put here? And when I'm challenged to do something like that, I tend to kind of put the outline and the writing in my head. I walk around with it for days, and all of a sudden it comes together. And so for me, that's what came together is, okay, there's all this stuff going on. The first thing we all need to do is stop and take a breather. Stop and think about, all right, now what am I going to do? So instead of just forging ahead and maybe running into an intersection and having a car accident, let's stop and think about what we need to do next. So that's where this came from. It's on your worksheet, you'll see that the acronyms are there. I actually did a Google search to see, I thought surely somebody else has used this for strategic planning kind of a process. And sure enough, I did not find anything. There are other things that S.T.O.P has been used for, but not for this. So I talk about the first step is to scan. And in typical strategic planning, we do a SWOT analysis. Then look at what's going to impact us the most. So target those trends that really seem to be important for whatever area we're doing the S.T.O.P process for. Look at what we have at our disposal. What resources do we have, whether it's a functional department, whether it's our personal household, or whether it's the entire organization. And then let's put those three pieces together and decide how we're now going to create our plan. So that's the overview of what that stands for. So before you start into that, though, it's important to take a quick assessment of where you are personally and where the members of your team are personally, just in terms of the impact of all these changes. So again, Michelle talked about the Kubler-Ross change curve. We sometimes call it the curve that we go through when we go through grief. And so when I think about where I am, for me personally, I think I'm now to the point where, I've accepted it. But quite frankly, I don't always stay there. There are days when I start sliding back down this curve. So anytime you start moving forward and working with some kind of a reorganization or planning session, be aware of how you are personally impacted and how you're feeling. because when we tend to ignore that, we cannot be as impactful as we might be, especially now when we've got critical needs that may not even being met by some people. So I refer you back to the classic Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that is, if we don't have these foundational needs met, physiological needs, I've got a place to stay, I know I've got food, and I feel safe, it's hard to even focus on these other issues, which get into how's my organization going to work? What are the things that we're going to move forward and do and actually become a more self actualized organization? And with the food deserts that we have and some of the issues in the economy, just be aware with the people that you're working with where they're coming from and make your expectations realistic in terms of what they may or may not be able to contribute. So keep that in mind as you move forward to do the stop process. As I said, this is kind of a mini strategic planning. And the classic strategic planning, you would do the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which is where are we now? And that's where the scan comes in. Um, I talk about assessing the storm damage of 2020, and I think that's where we're all at right now. We have some hope that we've got a vaccine, we've got a new administration, perhaps things will become better, but it's not going to happen overnight. So how is that going to impact us? So it's a good time to do, before you run into that traffic accident, take a breather and think about where you are. Look at what those trends are that are most going to impact you. Come back and think about how can you optimize your resources and then plan. And what I'm going to show you as we get through this is how we're using this process within our own agency. Also, within organizations, we used to do strategic planning maybe once every 5 years. Well, my goodness, if you think about where you were 5 years ago, you may not have even been at the same job. We certainly didn't have the same government in place. We did not have COVID, not even really on the horizon. And things are just changing so much faster in this day and age. We need to have a way that we can do this kind of assessment more frequently and quicker. When we would do street planning in the past, we might do a 1 day or a 2 day retreat, take everybody off site and have some social time and also do some planning. With virtuality out there, we can't always go off site and we may not be able to take that much time. So in our stop process, we're doing an abbreviated. A big trend in learning and development these days is chunking or working in little bite-sized modules to learn things. And that's the approach we've taken with the stop process of strategic planning, is to try to put it in modules. And that's why the stop was kind of spoke to me, is that let me focus on these things I need to do at each of these steps. So again, these are the 4 steps. The worksheet that you have has things broken out with some things that you can think about on that worksheet. So in the stop scan portion, you're looking at what's going on external to my organization, what's happening in my industry, what's happening internal. Do I have people who have had to leave because we don't have the funding we used to have, we don't have the income we used to have, and we've had to lay off? Or do I have people who are retiring and moving out? And then what's happening with our organization? How has the last year affected our performance? And then that will certainly drive you to think about where your organization is in terms of strengths and weaknesses. So this is just a time to reflect, a quick reflect. Think about what's motivating people within the organization. And this is where I get into being aware of that Maslow's hierarchy. Some people may be motivated in just keeping their job and coming to work. And how's your organization performance happening? Separate from the impact of the resources from your funding, but just how efficient is the organization within? How have you been doing things? Maybe even think back to 2019 when business was a little more normal. And how resilient were you as you got into this change process? And then what's your capacity? As you've had to do layoffs or people are working separately, how has that impacted your capacity? Once you've done that, then go back and think about, all right, what are the trends that are most going to affect my organization? An acronym that's very much a part of our world today is one that comes out of the military, and it's called VUCA, VUCA. Many times trends are created because of volatility within our area of expertise or our environment that can create uncertainty where you're not sure where you're headed or what's happening next to you. Complexity in that Michelle and I were just talking about the impact of virtuality and having to have technology that we're comfortable with, and what's a good lighting and what's a good microphone and how do I do these different things so that when you have a meeting or training with people, it's not just how do I go and engage those people and have the content, but how do I physically do it now with the technology? And then ambiguity. I'm just not sure where I need to be right now, and the input that I'm getting is not totally clear. So as you look at those trends, be aware those things are going to pop up as well. And in the worksheet, we've got some specific things for you to think about as you do that. And then finally, you're going to come back and look at, well, given the trends, given my SWOT analysis that I've done, where now have my resources and how do I optimize those resources? And as you think about resources, I've put some things here on the head of these columns to consider. How are you at getting buy-in? And can you get buy-in for this initiative? So it's unusual a little bit to think of that as a resource, but if you've got the personnel or you've got the expertise yourself, but the people who make the decisions don't see that, don't recognize that, then you're less likely to be able to move forward. So consider that being able to get other people involved and get buy-in is a resource. It is a competency. It's an expertise, and it should be considered. The other is, am I able to talk the language of the decision makers? So the language might be ROI and expenses and revenues and profit margins. And if you're not comfortable in that terminology, then work with someone who can help you do that so that whatever that decision maker finds important, you're able to speak to that importance. In the nonprofit world, it may be a whole different language in terms of support that you give to organizations and how efficient you are with your grant funding. So that is something you need to be aware of. And as you work on plans, be able to speak that language. Among your resources within the organization, how are they at learning? And don't expect people to grasp everything at once if part of your use of those resources is to create some development. Find ways to make the things that they need to learn available so that they can get it at their own time and they can become lifelong learners. That is important. Some people can grasp it all at once, and some people need to have it repeated over and over again, do it in little chunks. So I think instead of finding people who know it all, find people who know how to find it so that they can learn it. And part of optimizing your resources is to do evaluations in terms of their skills and competencies, and it may be soft skills as well as hard skills to see where they are. And it's not just one-time evaluations, it's ongoing evaluations. As we grow, how have we grown? And then finally, look at capacity. Do we have the right people in the right seats on the bus, and are they able to handle the work we have going forward? Or do we have excess capacity that perhaps we could re-engineer, re-educate to work with some others to be more effective? And then finally, when you're gone through the first three, you're ready to move forward with that plan. As you move forward with that plan, I would say learn to embrace these disruptions. Part of the reason that this VUCA term was so critical in the military is that when you're in a battlefield, it's always changing. And I think we've been in a constantly changing environment for decades now. So the best way to deal with that is to learn to recognize that change as a good thing. One thing I will mention is this whole virtual world. Yes, it's nice to be able to see people face to face, but I have probably connected with more people in the last year than I would have face to face just because of the accessibility of being on a Zoom call. And while I'm not in the room with them, I can see them. We talk to one another. And if we do this often enough, you do begin to develop a relationship. So for me, that's kind of been the gem hidden in the COVID is being forced to learn how to use virtual meetings and use that more for our training. Learn to partner with people as you work on your plan. I mentioned the STO that we've now created within JER HR Group so that we've got not only the Inspiring Solutions, but we've also got a group in Durham, North Carolina, who does on-demand video streaming of training and development so that we can work together to provide solutions for our clients that can be actual customized training or it can be off the shelf. And the goal that we have is to learn how can we help clients see where we can mix that so we can work with that. Michelle's team brings her great expertise in doing more webinars and lots of work in the healthcare industry. And Michelle's a professional speaker. So those are resources that we can learn to partner with our clients and actually bring a better delivery in the long run. In your plan, make sure you leave time to design and plan that delivery. Don't just go out just all excited and try to start doing that without planning and get your process in place. And as you have your process out there, be sure you track your success and remain accountable. So within our group, as I said, we are using the STOP process ourselves. So Michelle and I are co-facilitating our strategic planning. It's a good time for us because we've got new partners that we want to bridge and bring together. And our abbreviated process is one in which we are doing 4 2-hour sessions, one a week. So every Monday from 1 to 3, we do one part of the STOP process. Last Monday, we did the scan. Next week, we'll do the T. The next week, we'll do the O and then the P. Within our organization, we chose to keep the scan and the trends with a core group of people who are actually employees and work within JER Inspiring Solutions Group in Greensboro, New York, and in Iowa. And so that's about 12 or 13 people. And we are actually actively having discussions. And what we do is quick little breakouts. So instead of having long discussions about things, we will pose a question and we will go on a breakout and answer that question. And in advance of this session, we actually created a survey, our own kind of a little assessment to determine where we think we are within the organization, had people complete this in advance. Dana was very helpful in compiling it. We compile the comments, but we find out how many people had the same comment because that tells us not only is it an observation, it could be moving towards a trend. And we sent that out and shared that with everybody in advance of that first 2-hour session. So when you're trying to do something quickly like that, preparatory work, pre-reading is key. That's a part of blended learning in general, is if you can do things in advance, then you can do things more quickly when you are voice to voice or face to face. And so this is an example of what we did. Now I'll go back and say that our next step will be to pull in additional partners within our organization for the optimizing the plan. So once we've got our initial scan and trend analysis done, we'll summarize that, send it out to people from Training Network and our affiliates who are not employees but are consultants, give them some pre-read, and then invite them in for the optimize and the plan sections. So that's how we're using it within our group, just to give you an idea. And I'm going to share now back with Michelle and let her tell you about an exciting opportunity for you.
All right.
You
Thank
need
you,
to go back.
Sandy. Yep, sorry. And I was trying to multitask at my
Yeah.
walking and chewing at the same time. You just do a great job. You know, I heard it the first half hour and I heard it again the second half hour. And it's just, I like the fresh approach. I've been doing strategic planning for 30 years, not only for our clients, but also within my own business. And I just love this facelift. You've given it a great, fresh, I think it's very timely because with COVID, people are in a situation where they really kind of need to rethink everything. So using the STOP process, the JER HR group is offering you as a participant an opportunity to experience, like we are, this culture scan assessment. So we will offer a complimentary assessment with 8 to 10 questions. I think we used 12 because we had a couple more that we wanted to add for up to 15 people within your organization. We'll compile it just like what Sandie showed to you earlier. That will give you kind of a summation of who said what, or not who said what, but what the common thoughts are.
We keep it anonymous. That's important.
Yes, very much so. In a complimentary 30-minute consultation. So if you use your senior leadership team to do that, if you're a smaller organization and you want maybe in everyone in the organization, but I really think that this is a great opportunity to get started moving your business forward into the new year and our new normal. So please feel free to stay on afterwards. Sandie and I will be here. It's fun to hear your questions, your challenges, your situations afterwards. And we want to invite you to stay inspired. Each month, we will continue to offer a webinar topic 3 times at the top of the hour, 9 Central, which is 10 Eastern. Again, at clients through the past year, have watch parties. So if you're able to get groups together in the office, or if you want to have multiple people Zoom in, we just don't want you to watch alone. Next month, I'm going to be presenting Bounce Back to Move Forward Through the COVID Crisis, teaching you about resilience using a bounce back project. And then Sandie's going to come back in March to talk about reaching out to others even while socially distanced. As you can see, we have our first quarter topics selected. Therefore, we need to hear from you. So as you close out of the webinar, please just take a couple minutes and share comments with Sandie and offer some suggestions of topics for the upcoming year. So once again, thank you, Sandie, for sharing your wisdom, your time, your talent. For the rest of you, thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to join us. And we look forward to serving you and inspiring in the new year. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everybody.